And by the grace of God, this is one of my favorite chapters in Genesis. So I'm actually really excited to dive in. And if you've been listening the past few chapters, it's been setting up for Genesis 32. Jacob finally left his father-in-law Laban and went back home after God told him, hey, go back to your father's land, to your brother Esau. Well, last time Jacob was near Esau, Esau wanted to kill him for taking his birthright and his blessing. And so Jacob doesn't know anything new about Esau. Esau doesn't know anything new about Jacob. It's been 20 plus years. And so you got to kind of keep that in the back of your head as we're reading this, and Jacob's heading towards Esau. Not sure if Esau's just going to kill him, his wife, his family, and everybody. If he's going to tell him, just get out of my face. If he's going to welcome him up. He has no idea. So he has to kind of prepare for the worst. So let's start reading here in chapter 32, verse 1. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's host. And he called the name of that place Manaam. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. I have oxen and asses and flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in his sight. And so he's telling them basically, go tell him, he is my older brother, so that's in this context that he's calling him my lord here. It's basically kind of a term of respect, kind of like saying sir back in that day, letting him know that, hey, I'm not come back to say, ha-ha, I still have the blessing, or ha-ha, I still have the birthright. No, he's coming kind of as a servant to Esau, afraid that Esau is going to kill him, so he's trying to butter him up a little bit. In verse 6, and the messengers returned to Jacob and saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with them. And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. See, Jacob heard, he said, 400 men? Well, he's coming to kill Saul. Otherwise, why would he be bringing that many men for? And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and camels, into two bands, or two different groups. And he said, if Esau come to the one and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And so that was the point of splitting them up. He said, okay, well, at least I can save half of everything I have. And Jacob said, O God, my father Abraham, the God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saith unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred. I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I have become two bands, or the two groups. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. And so in verses 1 through 8 here, Jacob, he sees, it says in verse 1, angels of God met with him. And when he saw them, he said, this is God's host. So he's seen this angel encampment. So he knows God is with him. And yet he still prepares for the worst. He still prepares, splits his people up into two groups, and still prepares for the worst. But in verses 9 through 12, he still, even though he prepares for it, he still prays to God and reminds God of his promise to go to Esau. Now, this isn't Jacob going, hey, God, don't forget, you said this. No. This is him kind of going, kind of like you ever promise your kid, like, oh, yeah, if you behave here, we'll go get ice cream after. And then they behave, and the moment you start to get in the car, they go, you said ice cream, right? We're going to get ice cream, right? You remember you were taking them to ice cream, but they're making sure they're going to remind you that you said what you said. And that's kind of what Jacob's doing here, but he's doing it out of fear. He's like, I'm scared of Esau. Lord, you said you were going to protect me. You told me to come here. You told me that I would have a multitude come out from me that was more numerous than the sands of the sea. Can't do that if Esau kills everybody. So it's kind of in your hands now, Lord. So he's trusting God, but still preparing for the worst. And so, he reminds God, he reminds God in order to remind himself because he was scared. You got to remember the last time Esau seen Jacob, he was ready to kill him. So, go back here in verse 13. And he lodged there the same night and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats and 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their colts, 40 kine and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 fowls. Altogether, that is 550 animals that he is going to gift to Esau. Verse 16. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, and every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Who art thou? And where do thou go? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent from unto my lord Esau, and behold, he is also behind us. And so command he the second and third, and all that followed the droves, saying, On this manner ye shall speak unto Esau when ye find him. And so basically what he's saying is, we're going to take all these 550 animals and these servants and everything, and we're going to divide them up into kind of groups. And the first group's going to go and meet Esau. And the next group, instead of one just big group, we're going to divide them up. And the next group is going to come a little later, 4 or 5 hours later maybe. And the next group 4 or 5 hours after that, or however long. And the point was, kind of like when you're getting served like a multi-course meal. They don't throw down your salad, appetizer, entree, and dessert all at once. No, they give you your salad. Then when you're done with that, they take it, and they give you your entree. Then they give you your, and they wait till the one's done before they give you the next one. It's kind of how he's doing it this way. That way, he doesn't receive it all as like one big gift, and then he could be like, I don't care if there's a million here. He kind of receives the gifts and goes, and then receives another gift, and then receives another gift. Jacob's hoping this will kind of soften Esau up a little bit to let him know, like, hey, I have this. Because, again, Esau doesn't know how much. Jacob's poor for all Esau knows. Now, he's not. God has blessed him dearly. But so when he sees that first drove, he might think that's everything Jacob has. And then more comes, and then more comes, and then more comes. So this is the thought in Jacob's head as he trusts God. He reminded God of his promise, but he's still putting the works in. This is the works behind his faith of, hey, let's still do this the right way. Let's do this the best way possible. And, hopefully the best will work out. All right, where am I at here? Verse 20. And say ye moreover, behold, No, I read that. No, I didn't. And say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. So went the present over before him, and he himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons, and he passed over the ford Jabbok. And he said unto them, and had sent over the brook, and sent over that he had. So he was within one of the groups, and then him and his wife and his 2 servants and kids all left. Then later on, he sent all the kids and the women away, so now he's by himself. And, because I'm sure he's sleepless. It says they did it in the middle of the night, and he just, is worried about what's going to happen with Esau. And in verse 24, and here where we really get going. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, when the man saw that he prevailed not against Jacob, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, "Thy name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hath prevailed." And that's the King James Version. Other versions say struggle or wrestle with God and with men and have prevailed. And verse 29, and Jacob asked him and said, "Tell me, I pray thee, thy name." And he said, "Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name?" And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. So let me kind of work backwards here a little bit. That last verse, verse 32, that's just the author kind of explaining, hey, here's this tradition we do. Here's why we do it. I don't think Jacob went, "Hey, I got a bad hip, so don't eat that part of the animal anymore." It's what they do now as remembrance back to Jacob. And so you got to remember when Moses is writing this, it's already hundreds of years later. They're already practicing that. He's writing this to say, hey, this is why we don't do this. All right, back into the story here a little bit. On verse 25, God dislocated Jacob's hip so that he would rely on God and not on his gifts that he was sending to Esau. He's about to go into what he might think is a battle to the death with his brother, and now he can barely walk. So God's saying, like, yeah, you're not going to rely on yourself, your armies, your gifts, your fighting ability. You're going to rely on me. And even after Jacob's thigh was dislocated, if you look in verse 26, this is after the dislocation, he says, "I will not let thee go except thou bless me." Even after he dislocated him, he still would not let him go. This shows how bad Jacob wanted this blessing. Does this sound familiar? Jacob was willing to deceive, lie, and steal the blessing from his brother. And here, he wanted the blessing so bad that all he had to do was just hang on. There's a lot of different variations, two main ones of people saying whether the man that he wrestled was an angel or like a pre-incarnate version of Christ. I don't think it's theologically incorrect or ultra correct to do one or the other. I see the arguments for both. I tend to lean towards a pre-incarnate version of Christ because it says in verse 30, "I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." Also, when he asks him his name, he doesn't tell him his name, but he immediately knows who it is. Remember, he had already encountered angels and God before that. When he encountered the group of angels, he didn't say, "Oh, I've met God face to face." It was only here that he said that. So that's why I believe this was a pre-incarnate version of Christ. Okay. So this is one of my favorite Bible passages because if you remember, all through Genesis, names are important. Names are important. I went through in Genesis 5 what all the names meant and how it was God predicting how he was going to save humanity through each individual name and everything, right? And what does Jacob mean? Deceiver, heel grabber, right? And that's what he was his whole life. And even when he met Laban, he met an even bigger deceiver, and it kind of made him slightly honest, but he never still made up for what he did back with Esau. So now God tells him, hey, you got to go back and you got to fix what you did with Esau. Well, he's prepared and he's all upset and everything. But it wasn't till he wrestled with God, and God said, "Who are you?" And it's just how I picture it in my mind, the wrestling. And this is when Jacob lets him go. "I will not let thee go except thou bless me." And he said unto him, "What is thy name?" And I feel like at that point is when Jacob let go, and he just said, "Jacob." It was finally Jacob admitting who he was, what he had done, and admitting to his problems. His problems wasn't anybody else's fault. His problems wasn't, his dad didn't do the right thing, or his mom tricked him into doing it, or he suffered enough with Laban that, it should cover everything else up. And he just said, I'm Jacob. He finally admits who he is. And when he does that, when he finally admits and confesses to his own sins there of, hey, I did this wrong to Esau. I've deceived him. I've everything. That's when God changes his name and says, no, you are no longer Jacob, but Israel, which means wrestle with God. And I love that. There's a book. I should have looked up the name. My very first message I ever gave here was based off this book, but it's by Stephen Furtick. And he talks a lot about this passage in Genesis and how your name is your identity and how it changes who you are and everything. It's an amazing book. I'll have to get that to you some other time. But that's what makes me, that book is what made me love this passage and kind of made Jacob one of my favorite Bible characters of all time. So I got a few notes here I want to read because I knew I'd forget them. I might have already mentioned some of this, so just bear with me here. Jacob finally admitted who he had been, not just his name, but who he was. He finally confronted his past sins and took responsibility for them. Then in that moment, God changed his name and his destiny by renaming him to what he had done for the past 20 years. See, for the past 20 years with Laban, he had wrestled with man. He had dealt with it. But he never complained once. Jacob finally realized that he had been wrestling with God. Jacob finally realized he had been wrestling with God all his life and didn't know it. But even so, it still came at a price. Jacob had to limp the rest of his life because he didn't realize who he was wrestling with in the first place. Jacob wanted the blessing from his father so bad that he stole it from his brother, but wasn't satisfied until he got the blessing from his heavenly Father. At that moment, he got what he had been looking for his whole life. And I love this point. It says, the Bible, when it refers to like the God of Abraham and Isaac and all that later on, it says the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If you look all through the rest of the whole Bible. But it's weird because he renames them Israel. Why doesn't it say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel? It doesn't say that. One of the reasons I think that is that it shows that God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's to show that he's the God of Abraham because Abraham's the one who obeys and trusts him. He's the God of the one who might otherwise be forgotten, like Isaac. All of Isaac's stories are either related to Abraham or related to Jacob. He doesn't have any kind of stories of his own. And it's the God of the one who messed up everything for himself. He was the drifter, the heel grabber, the deceiver. And he was still the God of him. He's not just the God of who you are, he's the God of who you were. So when you think that you've messed up too far to go back, remember he's the God of Jacob. Not the God of Israel, although he is. He's the God of Jacob. Some takeaways here. Faith is key, but works show faith. Jacob believed, but he still worked for Laban for 20 years and didn't complain the whole time. He believed God, but also had a strategy to appease his brother. And I heard this sentence, and I'll close with this. The combo of the two, the works and faith, makes for a soul that honors God through a faith demonstrated through honest effort. I'll read that again. The combo of works and faith makes for a soul that honors God through a faith demonstrated through honest effort. Are there any questions this evening? No? All right, thank you.